The West Side Players, sometimes known as the West End Players, were founded by Carol Shemp in 1967. He served as a Vista volunteer, otherwise known as Volunteers in Service to America, and as such went out to serve the underprivileged communities within America. It was his hope that in providing a program to students ranging from ages 11 to 23, they would have some means of expressing themselves in a way that their schools and community could not provide. In his 1973 thesis for the University of Louisville, Mr. Shemp stated that the inception of the West Side Players came to fruition because of the observation that the education needs of the black youth were not being met in the west section of Louisville. Shemp wanted to provide students with an outlet for the feelings of frustration that were building in the black youth. Auditions were open to the public, but it was black youth who often auditioned, with the notable exception of just a few white students. For the students who joined this unique group, this was a chance for them to express the racism and prejudice that they felt within Louisville and the U.S. A Career Journal and Time magazine article states that students in the West Side Players would never have been taken seriously in the adult world. In some cases, this may be true, and perhaps that was why Carol Shemp devoted so much of himself to the theater group. To discuss the topics they felt were most paramount, Shemp and the students had to come up with a creative solution to broach subjects many people were afraid to talk about. The basic goal of the players was to encourage their audience to examine themselves, their behavior, and how they approach the world full of injustice. In this way, the West Side Players were able to have a conversation through theater about racial injustice and juvenile delinquency. Martina Nichols, pictured here, states, "We want to get people started thinking. We don't really care if they agree with what we're saying as long as we get a point across." At 16 years old, she summed up the group's goal. One of their most popular plays was In White America by Martin Duberman, which resulted in a plethora of letters to Shemp. Each letter expressed the delight and awe the authors felt after watching the performances. The result of this play was the buzzing of conversation. The public wanted to know how they could help the conversation continue. Martina Nichols recounts an interaction she had with a man at the end of In White America. The man said to her, "You are the first Negro I've seen as a person and not as a Negro." Martina's enthusiasm for the encounter shows how excited she was to be seen as a person rather than being judged by her appearance. For students facing racial discrimination on a regular basis, the man's words would have meant that their efforts on stage were working. At the beginning, they were funded by the Vista volunteers, and it was through Shemp's efforts and the players' outstanding performances that Vista funded them for a total of 3 years, before they were required to cut their involvement. Carol Shemp's service to Vista was terminated after 3 years. He was then free to dedicate himself to the West Side Players. They received donations from admiring fans blown away by their ability to open a dialogue about race. They also received money from the West End Community Council, small entry fees to see the plays, and the Kentucky Arts Commission. With their success comes the question of what happened. The simple answer is money. They were eventually unable to support themselves and their staff members. When he received a letter from the Rockefeller Foundation in June of 1969, he surely would have been crushed. Inside the letter was a rejection stating that the West Side Players did not fit the bill for what the Rockefeller Foundation was willing to pay for. The group was comprised of teenagers rather than college or university level performing arts students. In January of 1981, another letter was sent to Shemp from the United Negro College Fund, where they informed him that the United Negro College Fund, Fantasy Flight, and Telethon were, to quote, now in the history books. The West Side Players were thanked for helping them raise $14,000, and there's no mention that the players or Carol Shemp ever received this money. It is unknown if the letter was in response to a request for that money. April of 1981 boasts the last known date of a Career Journal article mentioning the players. The aptly named article, Money Woes Spell Doom for the West Side Players, features Carol Shemp stating that the players lost their SETA, or Comprehensive Employment Training Act, which had already promised to lay off some 300 of its employees, as well as their NEA, or National Endowment for the Arts. What little they earned from shows was ultimately unable to save them. Based on archival information and Courier Journal articles, the West Side Players seem to have faded into memory with no pomp and circumstance.
It is not known how the players felt about their beloved troop ending, and it is not known how the audience felt.